Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Good
Hari
morning.
Om, Hari Om.
Hari
Hari
Om,
Om,
everyone.
everyone.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, sir. Hari Om, everyone.
Hari Om.
Hari Om ji. Let us start.
Tomorrow in 22.
Okay. Om. Pratah smrami hridhi samsfuradatmatattvam Satchit sukham paramaham sagatim turiyam Yat swapna jagara sushuptam avaiti nityam Tad brahma nishkalamaham nacha bhuta sangaha Tapo bhikshina papanam Shantanam vitaraginam Mumukshunam apekshoyam Atma bodho vidhiyate Bodhonya sadhanebhyo hi Sakshan mokshaika sadhanam Pakasya vahni vajnanam Bina moksho na siddhyati. Okay. Hari Om. You can unmute yourselves, right?
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? If not, we will start from where we left off. So we were in the middle of the battlefield with Arjuna, beginning to collapse and starting to justify why he shouldn't fight this battle. Verse number 36 is where we concluded. Sin alone will accrue by killing these desperados. We talked about what is sin, and we also took a moment to acknowledge that Arjuna himself is oscillating. On the one hand, he's calling these people brave. On the one hand, he's calling these people desperados. How exactly does he feel about his enemies, and why exactly is he taking this decision or wanting to take this decision? Do the enemies have anything to do with his decision, or their nature has anything to do with the decision, or is it just his own emotional oscillation? So sin alone will accrue to us by killing these desperados. I'm sure there'll be many more questions about sin and the concept of sin as we'll see it again. We'll see it again in later chapters. Okay, verse number 37. Tasmannarha vayam hantum dhartarashtran svabandhavan Svajanam hi katham hatva Sukhinasyama madhava Tasmannarha vayam hantum Dhartarashtran svabandhavan Svajanam hi katham hatva Sukhinasyama madhava. Therefore, tasmat, the word tasmat, you can see in the beginning of this verse, it's a Sanskrit phrase for therefore. Tasmat. Now, this is the theme. You'll see this word tasmat very often in the Bhagavad Gita. and usually it will be Lord Krishna who will be using it. Tasmat is a conclusion to an argument. Therefore, this A, B, C, D, E. Therefore, Arjuna, F. A logical argument flows in this manner. You present your points and then you make a conclusion. That's the way in which a vad, a conversation, is meant to happen. So you'll see this word tasmat very often. There is no do's and don'ts, there is no shoulds and shouldn'ts, there is no orders and strange proclamations. There's many a logical argument in the Bhagavad Gita, and therefore you'll see this word tasmat very often. Herein Arjuna uses the word tasmat. See, you can also use tasmat. It doesn't matter whether the argument is right or wrong. That's for you to assess. But the point is, at the end of any argument comes a tasmat. So Arjuna has made a couple of points as to why he shouldn't fight the battle. Sin alone will accrue, this will happen, that will happen. Therefore, tasmat, what does he say? Therefore, it does not behoove us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra. Therefore, it does not behoove us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, our relatives. So now he uses the term our relatives. For how can we be happy by killing our own kinsmen? How can anyone be happy by killing our own kinsmen? You're absolutely right, Arjuna. You're not fighting this war to be happy. You're absolutely right. See, prima facie, if you listen to Arjuna, he is making a lot of sense. Individually, any of these statements make sense. But if you put it in the context, it's something that he is obliged to do. So you're not fighting this war to make anyone happy, and if anyone becomes happy through this battle, they are sadistic. It's a terrible situation. Nobody in their right mind should have brought us to the stage of the Mahabharata. But now that it is here, there's no going back. So how can we be happy by killing our own kinsmen? And that's the problem. The problem is with the fact that he's seeing his kinsmen. This is not about happy or unhappy. This is about righteousness. Verse number 38 and 39. So on this theme now, over the next 4 or 5 verses, Arjuna will make an argument. We'll go to 38, 39, 40. We'll go to 38, 39, 40. We'll chant these 3 verses first. Yeah. Yadyapyetena pashyanti lobhopahata chetasaha kulakshayakritam dosham mitradrohe cha patakam katham nagnyeyamasmabhihi papadasma nivartitum kulakshayakritam dosham prapashyadbhirjanardana kulakshaye prapashyantim kuladharma sanatanaha dharme nashte kulam kritsnam adharmo bhibhavatyuta. Although these with intelligence overwhelmed by greed see no evil in the destruction of the family and sin in treachery to friends, O Janardana, why should not we, who clearly see evil in the destruction of the family, learn to turn away from this sin? Let us take the higher moral ground. In the destruction of the family, the immemorial religious rights of the family perish. Having lost spirituality, impiety indeed overcomes the entire family. So, Lord Krishna is still silent. He's not said a word. See, look at the words he's using in this verse. He's saying Sanatana, Dharma. This is Lord Krishna's subject. See, I can understand if you remain quiet if someone is blabbering about a subject that is not your domain. They are speaking their, they are giving their opinions, and okay, you just sit quietly. But a subject, if you're the expert in a particular subject and you see someone else blabbering about it, imagine the amount of self-control required to just keep quiet. This is Lord Krishna's subject, Dharma, Sanatana. Huh? So he's staying quiet through all of this because he recognizes this is not the time to speak. So what is Arjuna saying now? He's bringing a new line of argument. Although with intelligence overwhelmed by greed, these people out here, their intelligence is overcome by their greed. Okay, very intelligent argument Arjuna is trying to make. This is how the mind tries to justify. Very interesting arguments. Look at these people. Their intelligence is overcome by greed. But that doesn't mean we should be overcome by greed. We clearly see the evil. Let our intelligence do its work. Let us follow our intelligence. We see the evil in the destruction of the family. Let us turn away from this sinful action. So there is sin in treachery to friends. There is a sin in destruction of the family. There is evil in the destruction of the family. Let us not be like them who don't see the problem in this. Let them do the problem. They have brought us to the situation. The point is, this all sounds well and good, but then you'll become a doormat to be used by others. If this is your line of argument in any situation in life, this is classic passive goodness. Classic passive goodness. We talked about passive goodness a couple of classes ago. Yes, you're recognizing the pain and suffering involved in a particular action, and you're recognizing that it would have been better to do without it. Of course, nobody wants problematic situations. Nobody wants a crisis. Nobody wants a family case in the family dispute in the court. Who wants a family dispute in the court? Who wouldn't want an out-of-court settlement? Only some people with sinister motives try to drag you into, and make use of loopholes in the law. That doesn't mean you take a step back and just let them do whatever they want. So nobody wants to be put in this position, no doubt about it. But simply retreating and being inactive, not taking any action, is passiveness. And that's the classic behavior that Arjuna is displaying. So totally aligned with Arjuna on the emotion. Of course, it's painful, but that doesn't mean you don't do anything. You have to be objective. You have to be objective. Senayor ubhayor madhya. You have to stand in the middle and do what you're supposed to do. So what does he say in verse number 40? Now, for 40 onward, 40, 41, 42, 43, he's talking about the he's trying to frame an argument. He's trying to convince Lord Krishna, I don't want to fight. So he says in this verse, in the destruction of the family, we are going ahead to destroy the family. Arjuna, Krishna, look what happens. In the destruction of the family, what happens? The immemorial religious rights of the family perish. Having lost spirituality, impiety indeed overcomes the entire family. In the destruction of the family, the immemorial religious rights of the family perish. Independently, perhaps an accurate statement, right? Although it need not be the case. You may be destroying certain rituals. You may be destroying certain practices, right? Now, what does that have to do with? Look at his conclusion out here. He's saying, having lost spirituality, impiety indeed overcomes the entire family. That is also independently true. When you lose a connection with spirituality and your deep culture, there is a sense of sort of a society goes astray, right? In the absence of knowledge, a society goes astray. So these are independently two perhaps sensible statements, but how are they connected? Arjuna, by trying to uphold righteousness, you are trying to follow spirituality. You're not losing spirituality. See, you are acting against those who are going against spiritual values. As a Pandava fighting against the Kauravas, you're going against those who are being unrighteous. That is upholding spiritual values. So you're not losing spirituality. These two things, these two statements, while independently perhaps meaningful, they have no connection with each other. Just by destroying the family, you're not losing spirituality. But anyway, let's assume that what you're saying makes sense. So you destroy the family, what happens? Time immemorial, religious rights of the family perish. Look at the words used in this verse. Kula dharma sanatanaha. Dharma sanatana dharma. Now, very often we associate dharma with rituals, but any tradition, any body of knowledge, any religion, any culture has two aspects. It has a ritual and a philosophy. Any culture, any religion has two aspects. There's a ritual and a philosophy. The ritual is just the outer shell. It's what is visible. It is the practices and traditions with which we sort of share a common emotion, no doubt. But beyond the ritual lies the philosophy. Beyond the ritual lies the core. The philosophy is the kernel, the core. So the ritual is the shell, the outer layer, the husk, you can say, whereas the philosophy is the core. Now you can't, in order to just keep up the shell, you can't compromise on the core. And sometimes to get to the core or to follow the core, you have to maybe do away with a couple of rituals, or do certain actions which may create an interruption in the rituals. But simply by interrupting rituals doesn't mean you are destroying the philosophy, right? In fact, sometimes to uphold the philosophy, you have to do things which may be inconvenient. So Arjuna is using all these big words, Sanatana Dharma, but he doesn't quite know the depth of these words, right? Dharma is a lot more than just rituals. So having lost spirituality, so destroy family, religious rights are perishing, and then you lose spirituality, and as a result of that, impiety indeed overcomes the family. Let us assume for a moment that this is making sense. Let's see what he goes on to say. 41, 42 and 43. We'll chant 41, 42, 43 together. Adharmabhibavat Krishna pradushyanti kulastriyah strishu dushtasu vashreya jayate varna sankarah sankaro narakayaiva kulagnanam kulasya cha patanti pitaro yesham luptapindodakakriyaha doshairetaiः kulagnanam varnasankarakaiः utsadyante jati dharmaha kuladharmascha shashvataha. So he continues, having lost spirituality, impiety overcomes the entire family. And what does he say? This verse will be very controversial. By the prevalence of impiety, O Krishna, the women of the family become corrupt. And women being corrupted, O Vashneya, another name for Krishna, leader of the Vrishni clan, Vashneya, there arises intermixture of castes, Varna Sankaraihi. And what happened? The intermixture of castes, the confusion of castes, leads to destroyers of the family and family to hell. Verily, their ancestors fall, deprived of the offerings of rice ball and water, And by these misdeeds that destroys the family, that cause intermixture of castes, the eternal religious rights of castes and families are destroyed. First things first, I'm so glad Arjuna said this and not Lord Krishna. Because if Lord Krishna had said this, I would have had to explain it to you. Because Arjuna has said this, we know he's blabbering. I don't have to take the labor of necessarily justifying what he's saying. All of this is half-baked knowledge. Right? We develop half-baked understanding of things. We pick up some big words and big phrases, and we try to,
Is
without
this
understanding the connotation of it. Huh?
is this
Sorry?
because of the anxiety he's having?
No, absolutely. It's all because of the anxiety he's
Yeah,
having. It's all
that's I
because
think yeah.
all of it is because
That's
of it.
why he's having so many thoughts, right?
Exactly. And see, when the mind races, it jumps. It's chanchal, right? The mind is chanchal, so his mind is being chanchal. Now, let's try to make sense of what he's saying. First of all, because of the religious rights, you lose spirituality. If you lose spirituality, impiety will prevail. Now, because of impiety, by the prevalence of impiety, the women of the family will become corrupt. Now, the women can take offense at this, but he's actually placing women on a pedestal. He's saying if the men are corrupted, at least you can survive. But if the women are corrupted, the family will collapse. Little bit of impiety is usually when men are trespassing. But when the anchor of a family becomes corrupt, that's when there's no hope. And when the women of the family become corrupt, there arises intermixture of castes. Now, don't ask me to explain this. If you want to ask what Arjuna meant, ask Arjuna, because only he knows what he meant. Even Lord Krishna will not heed a word of what he's saying. He'll not react to any of this because he knows it's all blabbering. See, we haven't even got to the point. Lord Krishna hasn't said a word, and for reason, because none of this actually makes sense. See, a lot of people pick out verses like this and find fault in the Bhagavad Gita. You have to tell them it's not Lord Krishna saying it, it's Arjuna blabbering this. In fact, it's a demonstration of confusion. It's a demonstration of a lack of understanding. It's a demonstration of half-baked knowledge, right? One thing I'd like to say though out here, the word caste, right? It's a very problematic word in today's day and age. But the word used out here is not jati. The word used out here is varna. Varna has a very specific meaning. In fact, in verse number 42 of chapter 18, in the very final chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Lord puts it in no uncertain terms. What is the varna? And he says clearly, your varna, your quote unquote, I won't call it caste, right? Because caste has certain connotations. But we are generally familiar with Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, right? In this country, because of absurd practices, we've developed several subcastes and jatis and this and that. Really, we should do away with all of it. That would be the best you could hit if you could hit reset. Right? If you could click reset, and let's look at this idea in a very fresh perspective. Verse number 42 of chapter 18 gives a very beautiful perspective. You don't want to call it caste, don't call it caste. You don't want to call it Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, don't call it that. Give it some other name. Okay? But look at this idea independently, because we have this prevailing we have it prevailing in corporate culture, we have it prevailing in any culture. This classification of people based on their temperament. He says people are classified based on their mental temperament, not by the family they are born into, not by the surname they have, not by maybe the education they have got, not by the outer qualifications they have. Nothing to do with anything of that. Not by their bank balance, not by the color of their skin. See, in fact, in this world today, we have many biases. We look at a bank balance and give a certain stature to a person. We look at the color of the skin, we give a certain stature to a person. We look at maybe a outer qualification. If someone has a 2 or 3 degrees, oh my God, they must be very knowledgeable. This has nothing to do with an outer status or a qualification. What he says in verse number 42 of chapter 18 is that you want to call it caste, you want to call it varna, whatever you want to call it, is based on your mental temperament, the way in which the nature of your mind, the quality of your thoughts, that determines your temperament, and the predominant temperament of yours will determine what you fall into. So I'll leave it for another day, but in brief, what is a Brahmana then? A Brahmana is not someone who has a certain surname. A Brahmana is not someone whose family has been following a certain practice. A Brahmana is not someone who shaves his head and keeps a choti. A Brahmana is not someone who wears beads. Right? A Brahmana is not someone who is Chaturvedi, Trivedi, Dvivedi. A Brahmana is not someone who spent 3 years in the Vedanta Academy. A Brahmana is someone who is sattvic by nature. Period. A Brahmana is someone who is sattvic by nature. Their thoughts, their mental temperament is predominantly sattva. What is sattvic? Sattvic means the quality of thoughts in objectivity, equanimity, maturity, unselfishness, a sense of oneness. It's endless. A spirit of detachment. These are all qualities that classify sattva. Now you decide. You decide who is a Brahmana. Similarly, a Kshatriya is one who is predominantly Rajasic with a significant proportion of Sattva. Rajas is the quality of thoughts in passion, desire, activity. It has flavors of agitation. It has flavors of desire-riddenness. When it is given a sattvic blend, it turns into a higher ambition, a bigger goal, a sense of service. That's why a Kshatriya is active but with a purpose. A Vaishya, on the other hand, is one who is predominantly Rajasic with shades of Tamas. So there is action, there is desire, there is agitation, but flavors of Tamas make it more close-minded. It becomes narrow-minded. Your actions are predominantly selfish, right? And then there is Shudra. Shudra is one who is predominantly tamasic in nature. Tamas means, and it's a state of mind. Okay, please understand. Tamas is a state of mind. So tamas is a state of mind of thoughts in inertia, in lethargy, in laziness, and incapacity to think for yourself. That's tamas. So when you are incapable of thinking for yourself, you need to follow. That's just how it is. Now, when you see it from this perspective, this concept takes a whole new meaning. In fact, at different times of your life, you're a different caste. At different stages of your learning, you're a different caste. When you begin your journey in any field, you start as a Shudra. You evolve and towards the end, regardless of what field you're in, you become a Brahmana because you become one who is able to give knowledge. You become one who is mature, who understands deeply. Even in the field of business, for example, you begin as a Shudra. You begin by taking orders. You begin by following others' instructions. You evolve to a state where you're a mentor, you're a guide. You're making investment decisions. You're a Brahmana. So, very interesting concept. And really the way in which it has been used, abused, it's better to do away with it. Let's look at it from a clean. That's my perspective, personal perspective. Otherwise, it's just unnecessarily problematic. But it's a beautiful concept. Now, what Arjuna meant by intermixture of castes, ask Arjuna. But generally, the point is that if there is an intermixture of castes in the sense that you are aligned with now look at this, now look at this phrase completely from the perspective of how I have explained varna. If you are aligned with someone who has a completely different mental temperament, what do we call it in today's day and age? In today's day and age, we say there's no compatibility. Look, within 10 minutes, I've made something from sound from completely abhorrent to something that's acceptable. There's lack of compatibility. You'll agree with me, I'll agree with you. Now, when there is a lack of compatibility, there are problems. Doesn't mean those problems are unsolvable, but generally you want to find people who have a similar mental temperament that is, or you want to look to perhaps seek the company to grow, right? That's the idea. But I don't know how any of these statements have any logical flow to what Arjuna is saying. Independently, these may be problematic, right? And what does he say thereafter? 42. He says, this intermixture of caste, this confusion of caste leads to the destroyers of the family and the family to hell. So because of this intermixture, there is agitation, and it leads the destroyers of the family, those who are causing this destruction, and the family. So not only those who are being slayed, the family, but even those who are destroying it, like me. It leads the destroyers of the family and the family to hell. Verily, the ancestors fall, deprived of the offerings of rice ball and water. Now he is mixing tradition with rituals, with the Pitru Paksha, with all sorts of strange concepts. What you and I need to understand is that Lord Krishna doesn't heed any of it. Okay, so that's exactly what we have to do. Please don't try to find sense in what he's saying. But he's saying, what is he saying? Still, since we are studying it, let us try to at least break down his argument. He's saying the confusion of castes, this intermixture of castes, it leads the family and the destroyers of the family to hell. What is hell? Hell and heaven are not geographical places, please. You don't go somewhere. Hell is a state of mental agitation, grave mental agitation. Heaven is a state of mental solace. Your body is aching after a long day and you call Urban Clap home. What happens? You're in heaven. Nowadays they bring some soothing music also. In the winter, if you order a massage at home, they'll bring you a heating pad. Oof, heaven. Huh? Immediately your mind is transported to a place of peace and tranquility, and that experiences heaven. Suppose right before your Urban Clap massage, you got some disturbing news, some business news. You know what will happen? With the same mattress, with the same music, with the same aroma, your mind will be racing, and every 5 minutes you'll be checking your phone. You'll not be able to enjoy that same experience. The physical experience being the same, your mind is in a state of tension. What's happening? You're not in heaven. So heaven is not a geographical place, my friends. Heaven is a state of mind. Similarly, hell is not a geographical place. It is a state of mind. That's the first thing Arjuna needs to understand. But he has some strange understanding. He thinks, oh, if I do all of these things, my family and me will go to hell. And there my ancestors will fall, and all the rituals we've been performing for their moksha, all of that will be destroyed. So the offering of rice ball and water, right? That's what we do on the Shraddh, the practice. So in our tradition and in many other traditions around the world, there is a practice of remembering the ancestors. There is a practice of serving the ancestors, and all of this has a deep philosophical significance. But when you take it literally, it becomes a problem. This is what's happening with Arjuna. He's taking it literally. He thinks there is some physical plane where these ancestors are, from where they will fall. There is some actual physical place which is called hell. These are all when a misunderstanding and fear creeps into your perspective, this is what happens. You you don't make sense. Anyway, for what we are concerned, Lord Krishna keeps quiet through all of this. But what does he say in verse number 43? He says, by these misdeeds, all these misdeeds of the destroyers of the family that cause the intermixture of castes, the eternal religious rights of castes and families are destroyed. So he makes a conclusion that because of all these misdeeds and because of all these intermixture of castes that has happened, as a result of that, the eternal religious rights of castes and families are destroyed. Arjuna sounding like a very wise person. Big, big words he's using. But let's take a minute to point out one more flaw. What did he say in verse number 40? He said that in the destruction of the family, the religious rights of the family are destroyed. They perish. In verse number 43, he's saying, because of all of these misdeeds, the eternal religious rights of the families are destroyed. He started his arguments by saying that because of the destruction of the family and religious rights, all of these things will happen. In 41, he said, because of what happens in verse number 40, 41, 42 will happen. Now he's saying, because of what's happening in 41 and 42, because of the misdeeds, these misdeeds of the destroyers of the family, because of intermixture of castes, what is happening, what he said in 40, that the religious rights of the families are destroyed. So he's reasoning in a circle. He's reasoning in a circle. That's what we have to recognize. Now, neither is he making, not only is he making absurd conclusions and claims, but he's also reasoning in a circle. He's blabbering. And in the state of anxiety, he's talking. He's just venting. There's no logical flow to his thoughts. Now, the mistake you and I make when someone is in this emotional state, we try to talk logic with them. It happens all the time. And when we try to talk logic to a person who is going through such an emotional upheaval, we think we are trying to communicate. They don't understand what we are communicating. They pick up pieces and they put it in wrong perspectives. And as a result, we get frustrated. They're not understanding me. They're not being able to understand what I'm saying. When someone is in this state, they might appear to be talking sense. They might appear like they are wanting to, make a valid argument, but actually they're not. They're blabbering. They're reasoning in circles. Their whatever they're saying has no logical flow to it. There's no logical connection to it. So, Arjuna, you're confused, buddy. You don't know what you're speaking. So, what is the conclusion? What does he say further in this regard? Verse number 44. Utsanna kula dharmanam manushyanam janardana narake niyatam vasaha bhavatityanu Utsanna kula dharmanam manushyanam janardana narake niyatam vasaha bhavatityanu We have heard, O Janardana. He's trying to sound wise. We have heard that men who have lost their family religious rights dwell in hell for an indefinite period. Where did he pick this up from? He must have picked it up from some Purana, if there were some Puranas back in those ages.
Alert from system UI server. Low battery.
One random line he's read somewhere. One random statement he must have read somewhere. So first of all, we have talked about hell and heaven. They are not geographical places. They are states of mind. Even then, yes, when a family loses their culture, when any society loses their culture, there is disarray, there is confusion, there is agitation, no doubt about it. no doubt about it. But A, it's neither for an indefinite period. B, Arjuna is not losing his dharma. Yes, this Mahabharat may cause a certain disturbance in familial relations, if at all. But dharma is not being destroyed. The values and the philosophy is not being destroyed. In fact, the values are being upheld, and through a churn, right? Through a churn and values being upheld, new rituals are created. A lot of the rituals you and I perform, they have actually been created through reformations over the ages, right? And every age has their own need, every age has their own requirement. A lot of the practices we have, for example, celebrating en masse. Say for example we do Durga Puja, or for example in Mumbai you have Ganesh Chaturthi. All of these practices, a lot of these practices, particularly Ganesh Chaturthi, for example, it's something that started in the British era. It's something that started as a social mobilization. It's a ritual and it has a lot of significance. It was born out of a certain churn, right? So through a churn, through upholding values and philosophy, new rituals come into place. So it's not that just by creating a disturbance you destroy the spirituality. But Arjuna is in this state of mind where he feels that by destroying these rituals, we'll go into hell for an indefinite period. It's not the case. It's not the case. You will pull yourself out. First of all, hell is a state of mind, and you'll be able to pull yourself out of hell through knowledge and values. So Arjuna is trying to convince Lord Krishna. See, had Arjuna been convinced, had he actually truly believed what he's saying out here, he wouldn't need Krishna's validation. He would have just walked away. The reason he's saying all of this and he's trying to sound so convincing and so grand and glorious is because he's seeking Lord Krishna's validation. He wants an okay from Lord Krishna. See, very often when we are confused, we want the other person to hear us out and agree with us. Only then will we actually follow what we are saying, because we ourselves aren't convinced. So heart in heart, Arjuna himself isn't convinced about what he's saying. Right? He's sounding grand and glorious, but he's not. He knows heart in heart that there are holes, there are gaps in his argument. Verse number 45. Aho bata mahat papam kartum vyavasita vayam yadrajya sukha lobhena hantum svajanu mudyataha. Aho bata mahat papam kartum vyavasita vayam yadrajya sukha lobhena hantum svajanu mudyataha. Alas, aho, alas, we are involved indeed to commit a great sin by preparing to slay our own kinsmen for the greed of pleasure and kingdom. So round, he's come back to the same thing he said in the first. Alas, because of all these things I have said, so sad. What are we doing? We're involved in a great sin. We're going to do some grave action, preparing to slay our own kinsmen for the sake of greed and pleasure. That's not the reason you're fighting the war, Arjuna. See, it would be very easy for Lord Krishna to come in and poke Arjuna's emotion. A lot of times we try to invoke rajas in someone, right? Rajas is emotion, rajas is greed, rajas is... He could have told Arjuna, you forgot what Duryodhana did to you. He could have stoked his ego. What are you? Come on, man. You forgot everything that happened. You forgot they burnt your house. You forgot the wrongs he has done. It would have been very easy for Lord Krishna to stoke Arjuna's emotion. But that's not the point. then the Bhagavad Gita wouldn't have been the Bhagavad Gita. Right action means performing action with the right intention. Right action means perform action with the right intention. When the right thought backs the action, that is right action. And that is the knowledge that Lord Krishna is going to convey to Arjuna. That you have to have the right thought behind your action. So clarify your thought. Why are you doing this? And for what purpose you're doing this? You're not doing it for greed. You're not doing it for pleasure. So the entire knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita is to infuse the right thought behind the action. When the intention is right, the action may end up being wrong, and that's okay, but you have to make choices. That's how you grow. Remember, the buddhi is a muscle, right? It grows by exercise. So you have to exercise your buddhi, your judgment, and make decisions with the right intention. Even if you make mistakes, even if you fail, no issue. There'll be no sin accrued, means there'll be no guilt accrued. Don't worry. So that's the larger message which Lord Krishna is going to deliver. But this is the reason why. It would have been very easy for Lord Krishna to just poke Arjuna out here and say, poke his emotion. That's what a lot of people do to us. They poke our emotion and try to make us act out of emotion, to make us act out of impulse, to make us act out of retribution, to make us act out of, a strong sense of, you can call it greed, emotion, whatever you want to call it. But that's not right action, right? Having thought about your intention very clearly, making an appropriate decision, that is right action. So Arjuna is in this state, alas, involved in this terrible deed for the sake of greed and pleasure of kingdom. And verse number 46 and 47, he concludes his argument. Having said all of this, he sits back at the back of his chariot and collapses. Verse number 46 and 47. Yadi mama pratikaram ashastram shastrapayanah dhartarashtrarane hanyuhu tanme kshemataram bhavet. Yadi mama pratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah dhartarashtrarane hanyuhu tanme kshemataram bhavet. Sanjaya uvacha eva muktvarjuna sankhye rathopastha upavishat visrijya sasharam chapam shoka samvigna manasaha. Sanjaya uvacha eva muktvarjuna sankhye rathopastha upavishat visrijya sasharam chapam shoka samvigra manasaha. So Arjuna concludes his monologue. He says, if the sons of Dhritarashtra armed with weapons would slay me unarmed and unresisting in battle, that would be better for me. So in conclusion, again, he's attempting to sound glorious. Let them kill me. Let them slay me. I will leave my weapons unarmed. Let them come, overcome me. I will not resist. That will be better than taking up this terrible action. At least now say something, O Krishna. I'm being so dramatic. At least now say something. So having said all of this, Sanjaya Uvacha, the narrator of this entire scene, Sanjaya is saying, having spoken thus in the battlefield, Arjuna sat down in the seat of the chariot. At the back of the seat of the chariot, casting away his weapons, his bow and arrow, and his mind in complete distress, filled with sorrow. He sits in the back of the battlefield. Imagine this 11th hour of battle, in the middle of the two armies, the greatest warrior of the Pandava army is completely collapsed. There's a strange silence in the middle of the battlefield. What happens now? What happens is chapter 2. So this is the conclusion of chapter 1, Arjuna Vishada Yoga. The next chapter is when we will first hear Lord Krishna begin to speak, and he speaks. He anyway. Let's get to it. Then we'll see what he says. Om Tat Sad Iti Shrimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama Prathamo Dhyayaha. So the tradition is we chant this concluding verse stating that we have completed our study of the first chapter. So at the end of every chapter there is a similar verse. We have completed our study of the first chapter, but we go back and chant the first verse together with the spirit that we're not quite done with our study. We will come back once again to deepen our understanding, to clarify our understanding, and get deeper into the text of this eternal knowledge. So with that spirit, we'll chant the first verse once together. Dhritarashtra uvacha dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta mamakah pandavaschaiva kimakurvata sanjaya. So here ends chapter 1. Arjuna has collapsed in the middle of the battlefield. We have 5 more minutes, so I will touch upon chapter 2. I'm glad I'm getting these 5 minutes to start talking about it. Anyone is burnt out? Anyone is done with class? Anyone wants to conclude? Any questions? Anybody would like to ask something or say something?
There is no question, but the thing is, Arjun is totally confused out of fear, और वो कुछ भी बोलता जा रहा है, उसको भी मालूम नहीं कि वो क्या बोल रहा है. तो दिस इज दी, और भगवान ने उसको कंधा दिया है बोलने के लिए. ये सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि he has listened to him totally, even though he was totally illogical. लेकिन कुछ लॉजिकल थे, जैसे उन्होंने वरण संकट के बारे में बोला है. दैट इज समथिंग लाइक पेडिग्री. इन द जानवरों में हम सोचते हैं कि जो नस्ल है कि अच्छी नस्ल चलती रहे, उसके बारे में उसने खाली बोला है. और बाकी लेडी के बारे में उन्होंने जो बोला है वो तो तुलसीदास ने भी बोला है कि he has not लेडीज की बहुत ज्यादा ढोर गवार शूद्र अति नारी सब तारण के अधिकारी, सब बोला ही किया है. तो लेडीज के बारे में उसने कुछ बोला है, तो कोई ऐसी बड़ी बात नहीं है. तो इट ओनली शोज दैट ही इज टोटली कंफ्यूज्ड, और उसकी जितनी भी व्याख्या है वो ध्यान देने लायक नहीं है. मेरा इतना ही कहना है.
Correct. And rightly said Omji that we have to learn from Lord Krishna that when someone is going through such an emotional state, we ought not judge what they are saying, we ought not mind what they are saying. वो कुछ गलत भी बोल जाएं, दिल पे नहीं लेनी चाहिए, उनको सुनना चाहिए. Let them vent, because they know not what they speak, they know not what they do, they know not what they are saying. And even when you have to, this is another thing, very important psychological method that Lord Krishna will adopt in chapter 2. You don't directly attack their understanding. You don't directly contradict someone. When someone is in a position to of a strong opinion and emotional, you don't directly attack what they are saying. You don't say what you have said is wrong. You have to go about in a roundabout way. You have to first impress them. You first have to impress them that what you are going to say is actually very meaningful, right? So you have to impress them with your own understanding, with your own level of knowledge. And that's why in chapter number 2, it's called Sankhya Yoga. It's perhaps the most philosophical chapter of the Bhagavad Gita.
Of course.
It's least relevant to Arjuna. The most important chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the least relevant to Arjuna. And there's a psychological reason behind this. The Lord is wanting to impress upon Arjuna rather than attack his misunderstanding. He wants Arjuna to completely surrender to him. He wants Arjuna to be in complete awe that, oh my God, I have to listen to what is being said. Right? It's a challenge. How many of us are able to do that in an argument? In any argument, we lock horns with the other person. How many of us are able to impress? It's a psychological method to do it, right? And you have to manage the other person's ego in doing that. So, not heeding what Arjuna is saying, Lord Krishna gives us the highest philosophy. It's called Sankhya. Sankhya Yoga comes from the word Sankhya. Sankhya is a philosophical tradition in the Hindu culture, right? So there's a technical meaning behind the word Sankhya, and we'll see broadly what Sankhya philosophy covers through the course of this chapter. It talks about Prakriti and Purusha. It talks about Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. This entire chapter gives out that philosophy. So this chapter is broken up into, again, 6 parts according to Swamiji, the work done by Swamiji. He's divided this chapter into 6 parts based on the flow of thought. So the first 10 verses are still covering Arjuna's despondent condition. It's a carry forward from the chapter. You may be thinking, oh my God, I've had enough of this. Let's get to the point, man. But bear with us a little more. Just to, it's a very interesting, sort of transition. This despondent condition is also, there's a clear emotional shift in Arjuna where he surrenders, right? So from a state of confused conviction, from a state of a misunderstood conviction, he comes to a place of acknowledging that perhaps he's not right and I need your help, O Krishna. So he expressively asks for Lord Krishna's help, and that happens specifically after Lord Krishna speaks. So in the first 2 verses of the chapter, actually, Lord Krishna does say something, right? And it says something that, again, it's not necessarily meant to convey knowledge. It's meant to shake him up, right? It's meant to bring about that shift, that awareness in Arjuna. He was expecting to listen to something very different from Krishna. He was expecting Krishna that perhaps, oh, Krishna will agree with what I have said. Perhaps Krishna will agree with all these big phrases and these big concepts I have spoken about. He was expecting to hear something. He heard something altogether different. Very 2 hard-hitting verses. Anyway, so in Arjuna's despondent condition, that concludes with him completely surrendering. But instead of starting with trying to convince Arjuna why he is wrong, the Lord gives out the highest philosophical knowledge. Right? So he talks about from 11 to 30, he talks about the indestructibility of the Atman. Many famous verses are coming from this section. Unfortunately, people remember the Bhagavad Gita only in times of crisis. Generally, when there's a death in the family, that's the first time people have heard of the Bhagavad Gita, and in the obituary they'll put a quote, they'll put a verse. 9 out of 10 times the verse that comes from the Bhagavad Gita in anyone's obituary is from this section.
Guruji, is Arjun actually emotional, or is it out of anxiety, or is it out of fear that he was talking just few minutes before the battle?
Yeah. Fear and anxiety are emotions only, na? What is it? What else? Fear and anxiety are emotions only. Emotions can be positive, emotions can be negative. Emotions can be weak, emotion can be strong. Emotions can be given a higher directions, emotion can be directionless. Fear and anxiety are directionless negative emotions.
Okay.
When the buddhi is in control, it gives your emotions a higher direction. Ambition is a positive directed emotion. Because your buddhi is giving your desire a certain direction and you're making it a constructive emotion, right? So emotions may be positive or negative, given direction or maybe directionless. In this case, Arjuna's emotions are negative and directionless.
Fear की भी definition है, FEAR, fantasizing an event appearing real. That is the meaning of fear. Fantasizing an event appearing real. That
I
is
think
fear.
you've shared this before. This is very, very cool. I would urge people to take notes. Uh, some of these cool acronyms coming from OMG from time to time. Fantasizing an event that appears real. Interesting. That's exactly what fear is. A lot of times it's something that's imaginary. So in this imaginary state, Arjuna completely surrenders, and then Lord Krishna gives out the highest philosophy. And having given out that highest philosophy, with the hope that Arjuna has become a little awestruck, then he gives out a little more tempered knowledge relevant to Arjuna, that it is his duty to act. He's giving out a little bit of emotion, right? He's giving out a little bit of emotion. He's trying to make it appeal to Arjuna's emotion that it is in fact your duty to come into action. Thereafter, he explains what are desire-ridden actions and how beyond desire-ridden actions lie desireless actions. Desireless actions are what lead to spiritual evolution. Desire-ridden actions keep you bound, keep you entangled in samsara. So section 4 and 5 talk about this philosophy of desire-ridden actions and desireless actions. Very important concepts from the philosophy of Sankhya. You understand this section well, you will get a good foundation in Vedanta philosophy. You understand this section well, you'll get a good foundation. Very, very interesting verses that serve as a foundation. And thereafter, verse number 54 to 72, there's a little bit small question that Arjuna asks in verse number 54. Again, unrelated, because it shows that Arjuna is recovering, but he hasn't quite got himself in control yet, right? He's recovering, so he's not completely emotional, but he doesn't quite reference what has just been spoken about. He asks a completely different question. He says, what is the description of a person who is enlightened? What is the description of an enlightened person? Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava sthitadhi kim prabhasheta kimasita vrajeta kim. Verse number 54 of the Bhagavad Gita. So chapter 2. So Arjuna asks this question, and as a result, the Lord gives a beautiful description of who is an enlightened soul, who is a spiritually evolved person, a beautiful description of spiritual evolution. We have all sorts of concepts of what a spiritually evolved person should be like, should look like, right? What they should do. The Lord gives a beautiful description which will completely remove a lot of misconceptions, will give us a great clarity on how to identify spiritual evolution in an individual. So that in summary is what we're up for in the upcoming chapter. We'll start this in the next class. For now, we'll conclude and we'll see you again on Thursday. So thank you so much for joining in. We'll start on Thursday, chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita at 7 a.m. Hari Om. Thank you so much.
Hari Om. Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari
Thank
Om.
you.
Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari